first in our series of our monthly community conversations. And as people hop on, they'll get a chance to share because we're going to be talking about different parts of the talk. But I would love to open this up. I know some of us, well, I know everyone on here. That's kind of a plus. And as we grow, we're excited to have people join from all over. And I would love to hear, perhaps, maybe give everybody a minute or two. If you would like to, I would love for everyone to at least introduce themselves, maybe say your name. You don't have to say last name, you can just say first name, where you're calling in from. And if you are in the mood to share, I'd love kind of your first initial thoughts about the talk. So maybe a key takeaway you pulled or something that really stuck out, and no pressure though. So if anybody would like to start, let me know. No? Okay, well, I'll start. I'll wake everybody up. My name's Rachel. I am a co-founder of Vibe Hive, which is an organization. We are based here in Atlanta, Georgia, and we are a community of artists, creative and healing artists from all around the globe. That's what we're growing. We're going into a global community. And our mission as Vibe Hive is to take care of the physical, mental, spiritual, and financial health of creators worldwide. So we want to provide a platform of resources, access to community. And so right now in the pandemic that we're in, we are shifting to all online and digital resources. So all of the offerings we're having in the future will be in a building. So that's a little background about Vibe Hive, but my name's Rachel. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. And one key takeaway I had, honestly, I've watched the talk a whole bunch of times, but I really appreciated Elizabeth's honesty in the process as an artist. And as an artist myself and a musician, it felt really good to kind of hear her share what she shared, because it's like, oh, I'm not alone in feeling crazy sometimes, in it being hard. And one of my favorite stories she shared too was the Tom Waits story at the end, talking about how he yells at his creative genius like, yo, I'm driving, come back when I can write it down. And it actually made me really thankful for the time that I'm living in, because technology is a tricky tool and it can be helpful and it can also be toxic. And I'm super grateful as someone that is oftentimes on the go for the piece of technology known as a voice recorder on my phone, because I seem to get most of my creative ideas when I'm driving. So I have a library full of voice memos. So I don't know, that story made me really thankful as an artist for the time that we're living in. So who's up next? Who's gonna be brave?
Well, I can say something.
Okay.
I liked her, I love Tom Waits' music anyway. I love his style, but it is pretty dark. But I liked her story about it reminded me of, I guess, that ecstatic dancing or whatever, but she talked about how people would, I guess their muses would overtake them or whatever, and they would be one, in the dance still. I don't know. I just like that story about the dancers.
The dancers becoming kind of one with God.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is up for sharing or introducing themselves.
This is Darren. I'm in Atlanta, and yeah, the Tom Waits was interesting. That he obviously there's a lot of anxiety when it comes to that stuff. But for him to be brave enough to say fuck it, and to sort of yell back at the creative juices, knowing that, well, there might be a risk there of losing that, but knowing the other effects of that anxiety that comes with trying to seize every single moment I don't know, it felt like it was a brave thing, but also to say that outwardly, because I mean that could be, I mean, insecurity there, but yeah, I really appreciated him just sort of saying that. But yeah, that anxiousness that we all feel when we do things, or maybe it's because we're going to miss out on something. I felt was, I don't know, it was an interesting perspective. I never thought of it or heard anybody talk about it like that.
Nice. Awesome. Well, Anthony, do you have any first initial thoughts?
Yeah, my name is Anthony. I'm here in Atlanta, and the whole talk was, I think, really well done and really well researched and thought out, and how she had interviewed several different artists to kind of explain some different examples of how people perceive this. And I mean, kind of starting the talk off with the whole, like, are you afraid? Blah, 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 blah. Especially in today's age, or for forever, it's been like artistry has never been a real job. Like, are you going to go get a real job? So I like how she kind of said, I'm going to do my job and show up and write the book. And then, Mr. Creative Genius, if you're, I'm doing the best that I can. If you want to help, that'd be great. But like showing up to do her job, I think was a good distinction, because there's so many, it's a societal thing that artistry is not work, that you should be afraid to express yourself creatively, that, you should be afraid of failure. And I just think that that's definitely a very toxic outlook on creativity and artistry, because creativity and artistry to me is an exploration of the unknown. And of course like she mentions, of course there's moments where you're afraid, but you won't grow unless you explore those patterns and those intricacies. And getting outside of your comfort zone there's not a lot of growth in the comfort zone. And creativity can be a very uncomfortable experience, and artistry can be. But I think really her starting to talk off by honing in on the societal, systemic, fear-based mentality that surrounds artistry is a really important way to set the stage for the rest of the talk.
I agree. It's interesting. And I gotta to add to that briefly before I hop into some questions is, again, here we are in a pandemic, and everybody was quarantined, and everybody is still quarantined in many areas, and everybody should potentially still be quarantined in some areas where they're not. But regardless, people are sharing about how the arts are getting them through this. Streaming on Netflix, or watching artists paint live, or new music coming out that they can listen to. And so that's a very valid point that she makes. And Anthony, I happen to know your background and your job before being a musician. But specifically, she mentions the job of an engineer. And, I'm curious if you're open to share your own family or friends or network, their reaction when you were headed on your path as an engineer, and then what happened when you took a different path.
Yeah, I mean, she pretty much hits the nail on the head. It's like an engineer for a corporation. I think the main thing that people are afraid of is not like, are you happy? Which maybe should be the number one concern that we have for others, is, are you happy? Are you healthy? You know what I mean? But was, how are you going to pay your bills? Was the whole, like, the money-based irrationality around, oh, well, you have this really nice paying corporate job as an engineer, and you're going to give that up to go do something that's complete, you know, to go be a musician where you have no idea how the money's going to work. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm not happy in corporate America. I'm not fulfilled in corporate America. I'm bored in corporate America. And so, you know, transitioning, obviously there's uncertainties about it, but transitioning away from the stability of going to work every day to the same office, getting the same paycheck all the time, you know, same, to the kind of unknown of artistry is, I mean, it's been exhilarating. If not, you know, there's definitely been plenty of certainty, but it's been exhilarating. And I just think that it's kind of a product of the fact that we are such a capitalistic, like money-based society that we all are thinking that way a lot, very often, like how's the money going to work out versus like, is this person happy? Is this person healthy? Does this person feel fulfilled? So those are that's kind of my comments on that, I suppose.
Awesome. We just had someone new hop on, so I'll let. So Macy, what we're doing now is just kind of going around and introducing ourselves and sharing, if you're open to it, your initial thoughts. Oh, did we lose her? Oh, we lost her. Okay, so we keep going. She might have lost connection. So what I'd like to start out with and see if anybody's interested in this specific topic is Elizabeth's willingness to shed light on the health and wellness of artists. A lot, because that is a mission of Vibe Hive. And we mentioned specifically the mental health. And she does bring up, why is it that suicide, addiction, alcohol, all of that seems to be more prevalent within the arts and almost accepted as just part of the journey.
Rach, I think it can be turned around, but I am of a generation that, you know, that was the saying, you must suffer for your art. So
that was just kind of the story that came with it.
Yeah, historically, yeah.
Okay.
I think it can be flipped easily. Not easily. I just mean, I'm not sure that it pertains.
That it has
always.
to stay. Yeah.
Right.
Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I think Mary is trying to get on. I was going to share the link because she says she's having technical difficulties.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, I know you're not able to see since you're audio only. She hopped on briefly and then lost connection. So we'll just, if she hops on again, we'll definitely give her an
Okay, I was just going to send her the audio link and she could do that.
Okay, I sent her that as well, so I'll let her know that she can join just by audio. So.
Okay.
But regarding the health and wellness of artists, and is that something that has to be a part of it? Do either of you gentlemen have any thoughts or reaction?
I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, because with my background, I'm probably more on like the corporate consulting, but more of a love of the like the writing side of things. But a lot of close friends who are artists, I mean, suffer from that, and I guess my mind goes to solutions, like, or not necessarily solutions, but why? Like, what's the cause of that? I mean, obviously, there's not necessarily a cause, but my mind goes to like structure. I mean, the level of pressure that comes with taking something of your soul and sharing it with others, or whatever that form of expression is, and for you to be judged on it. I've had a lot of discussions with, close I mean, some of my best friends, and we have those discussions of, you know, what, not to say just what's somebody not going to like it, but I mean, it's part of them. I mean, you know, it's out there in the universe. People have taken, you know, pieces of their soul and put it out there, and for somebody else to just, you know, trample on it or over criticize it. And, you know, I think even to Anthony, your point of, you know, the commercialization of everything, I've had a lot of intense sort of conversations when it comes to even, you know, how to even monetize it, where, you know, some of my friends are feel guilty, you know, when people are coming in to say, okay, yeah, what's your inspiration, you know, and all the sort of like the crap that comes with it. But then when they start to haggle on price, at least again, that's my discussions with some of the people that I know. I mean, it starts to cut away at them, you know, that, I mean, it's that you're commoditizing like what they're doing, and you're not taking into account that, you know, this is part of them. They can't just say, oh, well, you know, a bullet point format. Well, my inspiration was this, you know, I had a troubled childhood, and this red, it represents, you know, the bleeding, you know, of my heart, or, you know, or whatever it is. And I don't know, I see that sort of that soul crushing anxiety that comes with it. And then how do you deal with that? I mean, do you drink? Do you, you know, what do you do? How can you deal with that in a productive manner? And it's just, it's difficult. But I guess my mind goes to, it's more of a personal expression, and that, I mean, it's going to hurt more. And I don't see how it couldn't. You know, anything that I've ever done that I've been passionate about, it hurts. You know, and it does hurt. And, you know, in the example of, you know, putting something out there in the world that you want to, you know, whether it's an expression or you want to better things, and then for people not to like it, or just to, you know, say harsh negative things about it, I can see how, you know, that sort of stereotype perpetuates itself. But it's also, it's more personal than doing a spreadsheet, in my opinion.
I'd love to add to that. We actually, Anthony and I have a track on our new album that's not out yet, specifically on that topic. Well, it's actually inspired by the death of a friend who was a fellow artist, who, at the end of the track, I share a story, just speaking the story of, he truly was a big catalyst in me getting over that fear of, like you talk about, Darren, of sharing a part of your soul. Because in our music work, I do vocals. That's predominantly what I do. And not to say that a dance isn't a form of expression like words are, or a painting, but I say abstract because art can be interpreted in so many different ways, but language is language. So when I tell a story or speak my words, for years it was always easy for me to sing a cover. I could sing about someone else's heartbreak or sing about someone else's troubled times, but when it came time to putting my own stories and experiences and recording them, it was terrifying. And so we have this track and share a story, asking him, like, I was asking him when he was still alive, I was like, how do you do it? And I describe it that way. I was like, how do you put your heart out there for all the world to either embrace or rip it apart? And his advice was, you just close yourself in the room, press record, and go for it. And you just do it over and over and over again. And eventually it gets easier. And don't mean to be a damper, it did not get easier for him. And this is one of the drivers for the community of Vibe Hive that we're creating, is we want to undo that story for artists and share tools. You know, we don't have to resort to numbing that sensation. There's something to be said for doing things that heighten those sensations when we figure out how to express them. And I think that's the key in Elizabeth's talk. I mean, to go back to ancient Rome and Greece, talk about a way out, like, just take the pressure off the human body and just say it's something else. It's blame it on the house elf. Like, oh, that was a bad track. Sorry, the leprechauns did it, not me. And that makes it a little bit lighter and less heavy to carry. Well, I'm curious if on this topic, if whether you see your, oh, did you want to add something?
Well, you talked about health and wellness, so I wanted to kind of speak on that a little bit. Because I feel like, well, first of all, as kind of a basis of understanding that I think that many people don't realize, not intentionally, probably unintentionally don't realize, is that arts are what feeds society. Like when people stop doing their work, they so many times they put on their favorite album, they go in the kitchen and look up a new recipe and cook culinary art. They watch a Netflix movie. They go to a concert. They go to a play. So we talk about like what are people doing for enjoyment. So many times, I mean, even going out in nature is looking at God's art, so to speak. So art is very much a fundamental like fabric of the world that we live in, and art brings so much enjoyment, and it brings so much life and color. Like when you walk down a street and you see a beautiful mural on the wall that otherwise would have just been gray cinder blocks, it brings so much vibrancy to our lives. And so I think that for people who appreciate art, which is everyone, because everybody is like, got their iPhone now, they can take those snaps, those pictures of this cool thing or that cool thing. I think definitely being able to like help people, and it's like you said earlier, Rachel, with the pandemic, like people turning to the arts because everyone's at home and depressed and doesn't know what to do. So like, let's watch Netflix. Let's watch this cool new show that's or whatever. So I think that's a like baseline understanding, is that art is a fabric of humanity. Singing, music, dancing has been a part of even the cave scriptures on the wall, like that has been a thing for forever, a way that people express themselves, in a way that people enjoy, in a way that people find vibrancy in life. So now she made that really kind of intense point, I felt, where it's like our artists are dying basically, and addiction, suicide, if we don't want to talk about like, if talking a lesser dramatic version of dying, but not like actually dying, but the art dying, or the creative dying, or the connection to the creative genius being cut off because of someone said you can't do it or whatever. I think that the health and wellness of artists is absolutely paramount to the survival of humanity, society, the United States, because like with everything that's happening now, it's the artists that are like responding to that and then kind of documenting that in a cultural, iconic way that is going to be looked at and remembered for forever, whether that's a photograph or a mural or a painting or a song or whatever. Like there's so many, like history is literally wrapped in art. It is art. Art is how we know everything about what the past is, and that's how it'll continue on into the future. So yeah, I definitely think that we need some sort of like systematic reform around it. And Darren, to your point, like come on, like as artists a lot of times struggle with pricing their work, because it's like, well, I spent 50 hours on this painting. Like, what do even at $10 an hour, that's still a $500 painting, but someone might balk at that price because they have no idea what it took to get into that. Not to mention the 50 hours that you spent on that one painting, but the 10 years before that painting that you were refining your skills and channeling your creative genius in better ways to be able to like embody that. So I definitely think that the health of artists kind of can really kind of boil down to like 2 or 3 main things. One is definitely financial. Like they need money to pay the rent, we need money to eat, you know? So like valuing the work that artists do by paying them what they're worth, and as society as a whole by understanding that their contribution to society is magnificent. You know, I don't want to say it's better than or worse than, you know, someone doing spreadsheets, because it all has to happen. You know what I mean? Like we're a puzzle. So all the pieces need to be in place to create the whole picture. But I think the de-edifying or the, you know, lessening or dulling of the artist's work or creation as it like in relation to its role to society is one way that we could definitely help to like lift artists up, by helping them understand that their work is absolutely necessary and needed and important and valued. And, you know, so like there's the financial well-being, and then the mental, you know, emotional well-being, which if artists were appreciated and valued and all that different stuff, and, you know, I think that we'd have much less of that kind of death of the art, both literally and figuratively, because people are supported. You know, it's like, yeah, I guess that was a pretty long-winded thing. But.
No, that was good. I mean, and it's a valid point. I wanted to chime in, talk it like just hearing about a painting, because you didn't even calculate in there just the cost of canvases and paints, you know, and and then how do you even put it, like Dan, you were talking about, how do you even put a price tag on like part of your soul being out there?
And Rachel, I'm just going to jump in, which is why, you know, from the beginning of time, medieval, Renaissance, I mean, there were always patrons of the arts. And so that there were people, there was a community that knew artists and their value. And wasn't just media, or it wasn't just art, like, you know, paintings and stuff. It was theater and singing and dancing and all that. And still, the artists depend on groups of society recognizing their value and supporting them, because their creations do take long processes to come to fruition, and then to bring it out into the public and try to make a living at it. So we also need a resurgence of patron of the arts too.
It's a very good point.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think that, you know, there does need a recognition that, you know, that artists need communities of support.
It's very true.
So so they can create, you know.
Well, I mean, because we live in a world, money is the vehicle. You know, you can't do anything without it being funded. So it's a very good point, you know, what happened to and patrons of the arts back in the old days were like high society people. And
right.
And
well,
perhaps,
I mean, yeah, the Vanderbilts, you know, all of the moneyed people. You know, I think of how museums and libraries and all of those things that came about, those were contributions to people who understood the value of the art.
well, and actually that kind of brings up an idea in my head, because there's clearly still money going into the arts these days. But unfortunately, I think what's happened is money is going into the creation of art that will make more money. And it's a
well, that may be true.
I mean, when I look at if you look at pop culture and the music industry as a money making machine, and what they churn out are the artists. I can speak more knowledgeably on music and the music world. You know, the musicians and the songwriters that I witness writing about stuff that matters and things that are happening in the world, and creating music that feeds people's soul and makes them feel better are they the ones getting massive record deals, you know, getting funded, getting put on global tours? No, it's these easily manipulated, easily shaped, I mean, Money Machine is really the only thing that's coming to mind.
Well, I agree with you that there are those producers that won't produce unless it's going to make them money.
Right. And so that brings up a whole other thing, is what's with our society of what we're putting a value on. What are we valuing?
Right.
That's what Anthony is. I love the incredibly large vision there of, we have to reprogram our world's, maybe not the whole world, but many countries' brains to revalue the arts. And I think that starts with the artist valuing their own work, and it expands from there, perhaps. So.
Yeah.
There's a interesting thing that came up with what Rhett was sharing and talking about patrons. And so I'm going to relate this to Kung Fu martial arts. And because my martial arts teacher is a Kung Fu master, but he still today has to go to an engineering job that he works overnight, and then he works all night, and then he still teaches Kung Fu 3 days a week in the morning, like the next morning. So he works all night, overnight, then teaches Kung Fu in the morning, then sleeps all day. And he has to do that because he has a family, and he has kids, and he has a mortgage, and he has all these things he has to take care of. Well, from what I understand, in the past, that's not the way that the Kung Fu masters, that's not the way that they were. It's not the way that it was. Like, the Kung Fu master would teach, and the students would bring him food. And the student, you know, they would bring him water, and they would bring him, like, the value wasn't a piece of paper, like a dollar bill. The value was the actual, like, necessities of what you need, like, you know, like housing, food, water. You know what I mean? And so that way, the master was just able to be the master.
Right, but that was more of a bartering system,
the
you
student,
know?
to be the best that he could be, to then teach the students to the best of his ability, to then further the art, you know, far and beyond, away from his. So, you know, that I bring that up to just say that, you know, there's absolutely the affluent support art, and they value art, and they don't have a problem necessarily buying a concert ticket or buying an album or buying a painting or buying a piece of pottery or whatever it is. But it's like, how do we instill that sort of community support aspect on the less affluent, who don't maybe have the resources that the affluent do, and still get a lot of value from the art and are still fed by the art, you know, and having a more community supportive type thing where, like, the masters in these different fields of artistry, whatever they may be, are fed by the community. It's more of a community, you know, like,
well,
versus
it's more of a it's more of a commune. I mean, that's how communes, and that's, you know, that's a whole nother, you know, that like in Israel there are what are they called, kibbutzes, whatever, and everybody barters, and you bring to the community your talent or what you, maybe you're a farmer or maybe whatever, but it was bartering before there was paper money, before there were coins and everything. And so I kind of get the idea that's what you're saying, Anthony, that, you know, we need to make it more community based, right? I don't know. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think where it's like a whole, like, this goes back to, I think, what I was saying earlier, like a whole societal understanding and appreciation of the value of art. And, you know, artists could be fed if everyone in society just, you know, like, if everyone paid 10 cents or something towards music or something, you know what I mean? And that was split up among musicians. Like, that would be like, you know, I don't know. I don't have a solution. I was just posing like an example of, in the past, how that worked with martial artists and masters and stuff.
I like that. I mean, I was thinking along the lines of support. Like, what does support look like? I mean, it's some of it is that community. Like, my my nephew's band, they've been around 10 years, a little over 10 years now. We Came as Romans, plug. Um, and, they lost their band member, lead singer last year, just to suicide. And they had been on the Warped Tour. And again, I would say I'm a little older, but I mean, my nephew, like mid-20s, he did it. He dropped out of, college and everything. And we saw him, do the whole thing. And, they're just a, hardcore metal band, but they've been around, they've been on TI's bus and, they've had such success, touring the world and everything. And, I've always been amazed, like how that they do it. And these bunch of, kids from Detroit. But, there is that support that's out there from a community standpoint. And not to say that, I mean, I could say that they got lucky, but, they've went through all the pitfalls of drinking too much to drinking organic tequila and, and all this other, like, crazy stuff. And now that they've been around long enough, they've, been around, people to help mentor them. But, they do a lot of festivals. And then, I'm in the back, I'm like the narc, in the back, like, all right, don't give that guy any, don't stay near that guy. But just to see the community aspect, again, of just even that genre where there's a lot of pain, just overall, and what that they sing about brotherhood, but then, they sing about, like Rachel, like, to your point of, your songs and some of that, those emotions, were about, there is that out there. At least I've seen some of that, but, to your point of, okay, what's the solution? I mean, some of it is that community aspect, but we've got some painter friends, and they were over at, the Georgia Museum of Modern Art, or AGOMA, I always forget what it is. And, it's not just like having mixers and fundraisers. It's truly about, checking in on people. It's that mental, wellness of just saying, yeah, if you're in almost like a commune type setting, I believe that's what, I can't remember, the other lady that was on here was saying too, of that approach where, I've been to a couple of those events, and it, obviously drinking and whatnot, but it was that appreciation, like, oh, you're in a studio, you work at nights, I work in the daytime, but then just to have that, and, trying to set aside time, whether it's music or art. So, but that Kung Fu example is awesome, that, that the art was elevated. So people appreciated it so much that, it was whatever that they could do, what, community aspect that they could all pitch in. There is some of that out there, at least that I've seen, and it's been helpful, because I guess my friends and my family that have been involved in that, the level of just support of other people coming and to appreciate them. Yeah, we know them, but then to see that community there. Not all, I would say all artists have that, or have that luxury, to be in those communities, because you have to apply, and the grants and, and whatnot. I mean, I know that there's a sort of a system and a structure for that, but I always think of things of, not say how I could solve them, but what are tangible solutions that are out there. But I like the idea of that community, but are there other ways to foster that? I mean, just having people like Rachel, you getting people together on this is a form of a solution. This is a form of a tool to help people talk it out, or just to be aware. And that's, I mean, does that help in the bigger picture? Yeah, I think it does. But could we put structure around it? But it's these types of things that, I think is needed, just for people to feel safe, or to say, hey, I'm struggling, or just to talk, about with it, out loud. But I always think of solutions. But I mean, I know that they're out there, but could there be more? Yes. Could people be talking about the mental health aspect of things? Yeah, as they should. I know that's a harder thing, but, it just takes people, I mean, not to throw it out there, Rachel, but it takes people like you, or people within that community that have that, the courage then to put it together. But I do feel hopeful that there are those types of, avenues out there, and hopefully, obviously we live in Atlanta, there's bigger, there's a really good art scene here, and it's a bigger city, but what about those people in, I don't know, LaGrange, or
Yeah.
Cleveland, like further out, like in Georgia, but do they have a network? But I don't know, but I do like that aspect of community, and there are different ways to support.
Yeah. One in a positive light, before I jump into another question for y'all, Atlanta actually through the pandemic, there's a beautiful community of artists that created a nonprofit called the Atlanta Artist Relief Fund. And when Anthony was talking about, the teacher being honored with his martial arts and being fed, Brett, I know you were talking about like the bartering system. The way I see it more is gifting, where, oh, we lost her. Gifting, where everybody on this planet has something they can give, has something they can share, has something they can offer. And when we enter from a place and live from a place of what can I offer of value, not monetary, just what can, even if it's just a smile, even if it's just a hello, what can I share of value? And when we all live in that place of sharing, then everybody lives in abundance. That's my own personal philosophy. But the Atlanta Artist Relief Fund, specifically regarding feeding, they have through the pandemic been feeding at no cost all artists that have been affected by the pandemic. And they have volunteers delivering meals, not just inside the perimeter, but way far out. I don't know if they're going as far as LaGrange and Cleveland. I don't know if their volunteer team has gone that far, but it's a small group of them that have been quarantined together, so it's safe for them to cook together. They do all the cooking and get the food out there, and it's pretty neat. And I think we can get there. Well, I'm curious as we get towards the end, because I know how I felt when she presented this idea, but we're talking about how do we support oh good, Rhett's back. Welcome back, Rhett. We lost you for a minute there.
I don't know. I don't know what happened. My phone, I don't know whether the signal went or whatever, but I'm back on.
You're back on. So, here we're talking about, well, what can we do to support the mental health of artists? And what Elizabeth presents is this idea of separating the creation from the self. And another example of that, I know it's silly, but if you've ever seen professional wrestling, like the WWE, these guys have a complete alter ego that goes into the ring to do the performance. And they put on the mask, and they, these guys are not that, or in women, guys and gals, and they, thems, all the pronouns that are wrestlers. I want to be inclusive here. They have a total alter ego, and they are allowed to flaunt that alter ego. Like, it is encouraged. They are meant to show up as someone totally different than themselves. So here Elizabeth is presenting not so much that the artist needs to publicly present as a separate entity or a separate being, but imagine that there is an external, like the Romans call it the daemons, and which is interesting because we talk about battling our demons as a creative. And the Greeks talked about specifically in the title of her talk, the creative genius. A genius wasn't someone clever or witty. A genius was that genie, that out-of-body genie that was there to help. So I would love to go around and just hear your initial thoughts on that concept. Is it woo-woo? Is it awesome? Is it realistic? Is it, kind of, she talks about people having fairies around and spreading fairy dust. So someone jump in that's comfortable.
It sounds like, as you described it, it almost sounds like balance. Like, I mean, that's a hard thing I think to do from a, creative aspect of things, because, I mean, not to say you get the creative juices flowing, but you get that inspiration, you have that single-minded focus, and you have to go with it. Because if not, I mean, what's the point? But how you described it, it almost sounds like that they were talking about, balance. Because at first when she said it, I was like, well, I mean, you got to give in. I mean, that's the thing. You got to go see when that inspiration comes, when you have to run in from the rice fields or wherever, she was, to write it down on paper. I mean, I appreciate that, but I'm the one that's running in, trying to write stuff down or put it in my iPhone. I looked at it the other day, and I have like 650 notes, from the last just a couple of years of just thoughts and stuff. I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to, relook at those, but how you described it, it was balance. But I don't know, that's a hard thing to do, because I think that gets to, she was trying to find a solution, that seemed like, to obviously the mental health, side of things. And I think that's where that Tom Waits example came up, because it was a great one, where he was just like, screw it, I'm not today, dude. You're not getting a hold of me today, devil, or wherever, whatever demon, wherever you want to say it. And he's just sort of like, nope. It took a lot of courage, but how many times does that not happen with creatives, and they get sort of sucked down into that. But balance is what comes to mind when I hear that. And I mean, that's a struggle for all eternity, I think. I mean, that's a hard one, and that's my take on it.
Rhett or Anthony, do either of you want to hop in on your initial reaction to that idea of a separate creative genius?
I'd rather not.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
So
I'd rather listen.
Okay.
So based on my beliefs, I wouldn't say that it's separate, because I believe that we're a soul, but we have a body and a mind and stuff. So like, to me, and my spiritual beliefs and my, creative beliefs and experience, it's not, the creative aspect of me isn't separate from me, but it is like elevated from me, if that makes sense. As in, for example, for our album covers art, the cover art for our albums, both of them came to me in meditation. And that was a moment where I specifically chose to sit in stillness. And oftentimes I will ask, like, hey, what's up with this or that? Or what should I write about, or whatever. But in these instances, I wasn't necessarily writing. I was just being an open channel to allow those like images and those thoughts to kind of be downloaded. So from my soul to my physical, mental, emotional self. So, I definitely believe the idea, because I see the creative genius as the soul, which is just essentially just a higher vibrational state of our being. So yeah, I definitely see those ideas being passed through, like the creative conduit, maybe, so to speak. And yeah, man, I think that idea is, because thoughts are so fleeting. Like, what is a thought? Where does a thought come from? Like, we know mechanically what a thought is. It's an electronic synthesis, or it's an electronic synapse in the brain. But like, where does inspiration come from? Where does the thought for inspiration come from? Like, it comes from our experiences. It comes from, but it's kind of just like floating in our field, and then eventually it just drops in, and we're like, oh, I'm gonna make this now. Where, maybe that had been floating in your field for a really long time. You hadn't heard the message from your creative genius or your soul. And it was that one little, like, blip of a moment where it just kind of dropped into your field, or that, like, remembering this experience that you had that in your past that you wanted to write about or something. So I think that's my thoughts on that.
I appreciate your pointing out the fact that I was using the word separate, because that's an interesting, because actually, I'll take not too much of your time, but I also, my personal beliefs and spiritual beliefs and creative beliefs, I also don't think it's separate, because I believe I am God and God is me. You are like, and the four of us on this call right now, we are all one. That's my personal belief. So I more feel it's not so much something that my human self needs to carry and burden all the time, but it's when I tap into my connection to source and do what I need to do to be a clear channel that it can come through. And the funny part is I can't control when it comes through. And so what I've learned from other discussions with one of my favorite songwriters, Ayla Nero, I had the opportunity to take a couple of courses with her, but she describes it as her only job as a creative and our only job as creatives. And even if like Darren, I know you said you feel like you're more of a corporate background, but we're all creating a life at all times. But she said her only job is just to be a catcher, just to catch as often as she can. And what I've learned in that process is I became aware of my own scarcity mentality. And when something would come through and I didn't quite catch it, I would then become fearful that nothing was ever going to come through again. And so when Elizabeth shared that in her talk, that resonated really deeply because I've been able to watch myself come out of that fear, and an understanding that there's an abundance of creativity and and the exact right songs will come through when they need to. And that's relieved a lot of pressure. And then also a release on how it looks. Because for a long time I had this idea in my head of what it's supposed to look like to be a songwriter. And that like I'm supposed to always be in this perfect Pinterest, perfect studio space with all the right plants and the incense burning, and like that's when it comes. Well, guess what? The other day I woke up, a song came to me in a dream, and I woke up and I was like, how can I get this down? Because I really have to pee. Pardon my overshare. So literally I ran to the bathroom with my phone and I straight recorded a quick voice memo while peeing. So like, it's not always picture perfect. But I got it out. I haven't gone back and listened to but I also had to release judgment of what I sounded like, because it's like I had just woken up. It wasn't perfect, but I got it out. So I personally loved Elizabeth drawing to light this relief of pressure and how that in itself can begin to support the mental health of artists. So okay, before we wrap up, Anthony, I saw you raise your hand, and then we'll kind of give people a chance to share some final thoughts, and we'll wrap up.
Yeah, just real quick on what you said about, the incense and the studio space and the perfect I mean, I think that there is value in having a container and a method and a system that works for each individual person, each individual artist, to like allow that creative genius to come. So if it's a ceremonial thing, like lighting a piece of incense, if it's something that you do consistently, then each time you sit in your studio and light the incense, then the creative genius is like, oh, it's time to go to work.
Pavlov.
Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of value in, I mean, obviously it can come at any time, like when we're driving down the highway, or whatever. But I think that by us, I think part of what we can do as creatives is to do our job by setting a container for the creativity, and consistently setting that container and consistently doing those rituals. Like Rising Appalachia is a group here in Atlanta, and before every show they do yoga and tea and meditation, and that gets them in the zone so that then when they go perform, they're just pure, it's just pure spirit. And you could tell when you see them perform that they are just channeling, like I got goosebumps like thinking about it, you know what I mean? So I think there's a lot of value though in just setting that container. Part of, like she said, my job is to show up to the table and write. So, it's the table, it's the pen, it's the paper, that's the container. And then now the creative genius can insert here.
Sorry, real quick, I do want to piggyback off of that and then we'll close it out. Because I will add to, it is those rituals and the consistency and those practices that I know I'm doing what serves me to remain an open channel, so that there can be moments like a song coming to me while I'm asleep. And it is my own personal practices that allow me to be that container for it to flow through. And I also love that Elizabeth shares it doesn't look the same for everyone, because hers is a workhorse thing. She has to show up every day in the same exact way. And it's got to be grueling and difficult, and it can look different. So I'd love to let everyone kind of share their final thoughts. I want to honor our 1 hour block, because I know people have a lot going on, but if you've got any final thoughts or feel like there was something you didn't get to say, please.
I just have one thing to add, and I wish I had come to this realization, but maybe if I share it, it will multiply down the generations. I'm a much different generation, but for me, the realization that expectations get in the way of everything. And so if you can dilute your expectations or calm them down, I think the path is clearer. That's all I have to say.
I love that. Any final thoughts, Anthony or Darren? Or even just your thoughts on this container as a whole?
I mean, support. I mean, it's I don't know, support. I mean, it goes, I think support goes beyond, many things and pandemic and whatnot, but, as we, you hit on the mental health side of things, where I know I am having several close people struggle, like, hardcore with, mental health from a creative standpoint and, substance standpoint. And I guess that's the thing that I sort of heard from, say, some of the conversations is support. What does that look like? I mean, support for the arts, but it's still mental health, at the end of the day. I mean, just, the way our society sort of is, and people are struggling, overall, but what does support look like? Support can be, like you said, a smile. It could be food, to the Kung Fu master. And it's not a cheesy thing of just, hey, be nice to each other, but it's support. It's support for your tribe, support for, band members and people on the Warped Tour, or, artists, feeding, and giving them food. It's just, if we can have more supportive measures, where people can, like this, they have a safe place to talk and, illuminate. And like what just Rhett said, a little bit before about, managing sort of expectations. I mean, that was a wonderful, sentiment, but, I guess my takeaway has just been support, and how can I look to support others, or support the restaurants, or to support the bands, or to support, the artists that, that I know. And is it just show up? Yeah. Is it to say, hey, look, here's a forum if you want to talk through stuff, what ways can I impact, to support others, knowing that it might just be a little bit, but could I impact somebody else's mental well-being, in just some small capacities, and that I want to do that.
I like that.
So I guess I'll just say real quick to close, I think that this was a really awesome TED Talk, and I think that it kind of brings to light a lot of the artist challenge, and I definitely will continue to share this. And, I'd love to, I think it'd be great to maybe, a year from now, like bring this one back around to the community conversations. And I feel like this particular video is going to be a kind of a staple of the Vibe Hive, maybe mentality training, because it's just so, it really like, the opening question or the opening statements of like fear-based whatever, are you afraid that you're going to be success, blah, blah, blah. That's something that we absolutely have to change in the artist world. Are you okay with, our artists dying off? Like, no, absolutely not. As I mentioned earlier, this is how history is documented. I mean, music through time is like, they say, oh, well, this one, I think both of there's this famous quote that says, art is how we decorate space and music is how we decorate time. But I think that generally art is also how we decorate time. It's famous paintings from ages ago that, denote the era and the styles and the emotions and all those different things, you know, like artists have a really fantastic way of taking the input from, you know, wherever, whether it's their creative genius or whether it's a societal something that's going on, like with the George Floyd stuff that's been happening, like all the amazing like artwork that's come out of that. You know, as sad as that is, but it's fostered all this incredible movement, this incredible art and everything. So I think artists have a critical role in our society. So, you know, I'm definitely not okay with it being the norm to just be afraid and then have anxiety and then quit and then, or die. Like that's not healthy. So, you know, I think that's a huge talking point from this. And then, you know, I love the idea of taking a bit of the pressure off of yourself as human, and because you are just a human. And, you know, like the way she talked about following up her best world seller book with another book being like the biggest, you know, where her greatest success is behind her. I think an important thing that we could do as artists and as friends of artists is to let people know that it's like the growth that matters. It's the evolution of your individual artistry that matters. So, you know, there's a lot of people, like musically, you know, there's a lot of people who say, I liked the old albums of some said artist, right? Because their newer music doesn't really resonate as much. They want the artist to be the old self. Well, that takes away that devalues the evolution of that artist. You have to allow artists to evolve and allow them to grow. And maybe it's not as commercially acceptable or commercially successful as a past work was, but that the important thing is that artist is growing, that artist is still creating, and that artist is still showing up to do their job. And so I think taking the pressure off is a good way to kind of look at that, and we can kind of just celebrate evolution of artists.
I love that. Well, I really appreciate everybody for attending, for enjoying the talk, for being willing to share perhaps with people that you've never met before. And this is what we want to create. And these final shares really kind of all tie in together, you know, the supporting each other and supporting oneself. And another tidbit I wanted to share real quick is Ayla Nero, who I already mentioned. She talks about even supporting she calls them her muses, which we've heard before, but her creative genius, by listening to what they want to be fed. And do they want some honey? Or do they want a bathtub? Or do they want an afternoon tea in the garden? And she listens to them and gives them what they want to call them out more often. And it's such a fun, playful idea to call on those parts and as you mentioned, to remove expectation and just, Anthony, like you said, give the artist space to just keep creating, because that's all they're meant to do, and that's enough. That is enough. So thank you all for being a part of the community conversations. These will be monthly, and it'll be a different talk every month, and we'll continue to share all the details. So keep watching Vibe Hive. We've got lots of offerings on our Patreon if you're ever curious. Darren, it sounds like you may have some artists that might enjoy some of the meditations and movement offerings that are specifically geared towards the health and wellness of creators. So, and we keep it, since it's online and not in a physical building, we're able to keep the price point low. So one of our goals is to rid the world of the myth of the starving artist, because artists deserve to get paid and know that they're enough. So that's what we're doing. So thank y'all.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it.
Until next time.
Thank you,
Bye, guys.
Rachel.
Bye.
Bye.